I just like weird, just anything that's real strange. So what I like a lot of old movies, a lot of horror movies. I was a big time horror buff for most of my life. But and horror of all kinds. I love every stuff from the 20s all the way to now. I love silent films. I love just strange international cinema. Movies. This big time horror buff. Oh, it's me.
I think we're live.
I think we're live. Yeah.
Yeah, we're live
slight
now
delay,
on Facebook.
but yeah.
Yeah. I expect there'll be some lag on the actual feed, but all right. Well, we did it.
All right, guys. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second episode of the Opposite Thought program. I'm so happy to have Amanda Sukenik, Arthur Tenturier as my guests today for this episode. It's gonna be a special episode since it's gonna be in English. The main question that is gonna be about this episode is life itself a problem? I'm gonna start by asking Arthur, do you think that life itself is a problem?
All right, straight into it. Hi, everyone. So, Laith, no, I don't think life itself is a problem. I think life is just life is. It just is. It's neither a problem or not a problem.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Arthur. What about Amanda? Do you think life itself is a problem?
I think it's the biggest problem in the entire universe. I think there is no other real substantial problem. I think it's something that human beings need to try to take some responsibility for. I think it's a problem that we keep on perpetuating over and over and over again for absolutely no reason. And it was never, I think the biggest point, especially to make on an aphorism page, is that it was never a good thing, that it sort of started out as a bad design, that, there's lots of lovely things on planet Earth. There's lots of lovely little, emotions and moments that we can have. But the sum total of all of those positives don't equal the massive deluge of negative that is constantly produced by life.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. So we have opposite thoughts here, as you can see. I'm gonna start with Amanda with the first question. How do you know that life with all its negativity is worse than non-existence? What makes you so sure about that?
Worse than non-existence. Well, when we don't exist, we're not, we don't need anything. There's no consciousness, there's no hunger, there's no thirst, there's no need for love, there's no need for new action figures, there's no need for anything that we might derive once we are alive. Once we are alive, we are crushed by need, and especially by those needs that never get fulfilled, which is a whole lot of the need. And the other part of that need is not only the personal deprivation, but also the fact that you really can't derive satisfaction of your needs without taking it from something else. If I need a hamburger, some cow is going to be put in a negative state to feed my need. I'm a vegan, I'm just saying. There's all sorts of this give and take that filling needs require. So non-existence means that you're not only not in a negative state, but you're also not producing negative states in others. And that's a good thing.
Okay, so as we heard, Amanda, she's concerned about need, because when we are alive, we have needs to fulfill. And if we do not fulfill these needs, it's going to be a problem. Arthur, you heard Amanda's answer. How do you respond to that?
Well, the first thing I would say that then the problem is need, not necessarily life itself. I think it's very possible to live a life and be able to manage your needs and to manage your satisfaction. The problem is more how you live your life. And while I will grant her that it's maybe today we live in a very imbalanced way, the problem is the lack of balance and our inability to focus on what's important or on what would actually make us satisfied, not necessarily life itself.
So you do not agree that need is the problem, that we all have needs and it's like on the expense of somebody else to fulfill these needs?
So there's two things here. The first, the idea of need. Again, need in itself is not necessarily a problem. It's how you deal with it, and that's going to create another problem. Need is also the very reason you have enjoyment and satisfaction. It's when you fulfill this need, for instance, that you can be satisfied. So a need in itself is not a problem. It's more how you're going to deal with it. As for the idea of taking, well, you know my view on that. I mean, for me, it's that's how life works. You give and you take. And again, you can say that we have some balance problem at the moment, and I would agree with that. But I think the idea of life and this is completely part of life. It's not a problem. It's just how it is. I don't see it as a problem.
Amanda?
Well, I will slightly retract. Need is a problem. It's a gigantic problem, but the real problem is DNA. It's this original recipe that produced all of us, that had no plan, did not go to school to learn how to be a good DNA molecule and create satisfied beings, or that it was the fact that it was never a good recipe to begin with, that, you know, and need was one of the things that it produces, but also just this prevalence of suffering. I mean, suffering is the biggest problem in the universe, but it is produced, the origin of that, the thing that is producing it is this perpetuation of the DNA molecule. So I agree. I would, in a sense, there is some things that we can do about need. It is one of the biggest blights, I think, that the problem of DNA and suffering creates, or as a tool. I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but there isn't a whole lot that we can do to fix that massive problem of the fact that it never was this good recipe to begin with, that there is no intelligent design. That we're not created to be happy or satisfied. We're not created not to suffer, and that there's really no fix for that other than to just not create more of it. And that there's really no need to create more of it. We know how the story plays out over and over and over again.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Amanda. I'll go back to Arthur now and ask him a question. Arthur, do you think that there are some existential problems in life, or are they all based on circumstances?
I think there's both. Some problem can be very circumstantial, and some will be definitely related to life itself, to the fact that we are living sentient being. So I think both problems exist.
So you do think that there are some existential problems?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I have some questions that people ask on the page in Arabic, of course, but I'm going to translate it to English. Since you agree that there are existential problems in life, is it still worth it to procreate, and why? Why do you think it's still worth it?
So this answer, I think, is also an answer to what Amanda was saying before, is that I agree with the fact that, yeah, life is not perfect. I agree with that. But I think the other idea that you're defending, this idea of life should be made intelligently, so without problem, is just an invention of the mind. Perfection does not exist. Perfection is a fantasy that we have in our mind, which is a way that can help us deal with reality and so on. But on its own, it does not exist. You cannot have good without bad. So you're talking about this happy life, but this happy life would not exist if there was no suffering. You cannot have one without the other. So you're talking about something that simply isn't possible. It's just a fantasy, this idea of a perfect world where there is no suffering, because it literally cannot exist. If you're always happy, always perfect, like you're basically saying, then, you know what I'm saying? Then the perfection is not there anymore. There's no good anymore. There's no joy anymore, because they only exist in relatively to something else. So yeah.
So you think it's still worth it?
And then in another part also, I actually problem is also probably, I think, one of the biggest way we get joy and satisfaction in life. It's solving problem is probably one of the biggest human drive. If there was no problem, we'd probably be bored. And solving problem is, I think, is the number one human drive. This is what makes us move forward in history. This is why, I would say that the human condition on the scale of history, if you compare our condition today and the condition from before, it's only better. You can always stop and look at the details. Overall, the human condition has never stopped improving, and that's what this problem is drive us to.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Arthur. So Amanda, as you heard, Arthur said I'm going to summarize it, that perfectionism is a human invention, is a human mind invention, and that without bad, there's no good, without night, there's no day, without, as you can see, like opposite sides. So as he said also that we're going to be bored if there's no problems. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that all of these things are things that we have no choice other than to accept once we are alive. Once we exist, we have to accept certain things like we have to satisfy our needs. We have to accept that there is no perfection. But the fact that the real point of antinatalism is, do you have the right to saddle a new being with all of that imperfection, all of that need, all of these problems that it would never have to face if it didn't exist? If there's no, why create need for no need? Why create problems where problems don't have to be solved? It is fun to have to solve problems while we're alive, but those problems have no reason to have a need to be solved if we're not here. We create all of these problems. You can't have Superman without having the victim. So why keep creating the victim and keep creating a need for Superman? It's just silly. It's an Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its tail, which is a very common symbol of antinatalism. And antinatalism is trying to break that cycle, essentially. There's just no reason to keep saddling the next generation with the same problems, the same need to satisfy this or that, the same need to fix. There's nothing to fix if we're not here, and so to create so again, once we're here, we have to learn how, if possible, we have to learn how to enjoy our lives. We have to learn how to be satisfied. But it is what the antinatalist position, the Ephelist position is saying, is that it is an imposition to saddle a new being with all of that stuff that it really has no need for. And that the creation of that life not only saddles that being with all of this this weight, but it also puts this strain on the other living things around it. So there's a real innocence and aggressor that you create by creating a new being that that is only being created because somebody has a notion in their heads that this child will do this or this will serve this purpose. And it's an exploitive relationship in that sense, the parent-child relationship. Yeah.
So Amanda, your second question. Why do you think that some people who experience horrible disasters in their life on a personal level still want to have kids despite everything bad that happened to them? How do you explain this? Like, for example, someone who has been arrested and tortured in jail for several months, for example, and despite everything bad that he experienced, all kinds of suffering, he still insists that he wants to have a child. How do you explain this?
Well, I mean, I think one way of explaining it is optimism bias, but then it's also just we are addicted to quite a lot of things in this life. And one of the things that we're addicted to is narratives. And we constantly feel this need to perpetuate these narratives of hope, these narratives of triumph. And so for somebody, I understand it in one sense, to psychologically or physically go through some horror and then triumph above all of that and bring hope, of some kind. But it's a misplaced way of bringing hope into the world. Like the fact that you yourself have survived and triumphed and, gone on to, beyond all of those experiences. That is the triumph. But the idea of bringing a new child, it being a symbol of that perpetuation of hope or that triumph, is really just setting the same thing up to happen again. It's wonderful that people triumph over, those kinds of experiences. But the idea that you're going to put somebody else in that torturer's seat, that you're going to set somebody up for every possibility of that happening to them. There's no triumph there. there's no, it is a completely nihilistic conclusion to reach at the end of the day. That would be a good way to celebrate one's victory.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Arthur, how do you respond to Amanda after hearing her response?
So there's a lot to unpack. The two angles that I would tackle was, this idea of triumph, it's only one way to see it. You mentioned acceptance in your previous answer. And I think it's a key word here. I know, Lace, you've heard me saying a lot. And I think it's more this idea of accepting what happened to you and being at peace with it, which also take a lot of work on yourself, a lot of courage. So it's not just this idea of triumph, which is shown as sort of very eccentric or with a lot of ego. For me, it's more this idea of being at peace with it and being at peace with life, and just as the negative side and the positive side, and accepting the fact that bringing a kid in this world goes with it. And then you mentioned like optimism bias, and basically your whole point is based on this idea that, and antinatalism in general, that the world is a horrible place, and which I disagree with, and which I think that person who survived this horror and in its acceptance of it can very much see that the world there's more to it. The world is not just that. And when you mentioned the optimism bias, I think that the negativism bias, I know it as the power of bad, basically, but I think the idea is negativism bias, which is much more stronger than positivism bias. We tend to be much more affected as human beings in general by negative aspect. There's a lot of studies because on that, and that again, it's the first thing, it's in your mind and how to deal with it. And the fact that we have this bias at the moment, and the world we live in with our social media or media, which just sort of makes it even worse, if you want. It gives us that vision on the world, but I don't think that the world is necessarily such a bad place. Again, there's both. It's not just this horrible place like people make it out.
I don't think we're necessarily just saying that the world is a horrible place. The world is a risky place. There's all this risk that you're throwing a child into. You're rolling the dice with somebody else's welfare. So you may come as a living thing to accept all of these things. You may come to love torture and to accept that as a reality on planet Earth. What do you do if you produce a suffering child and you're that glib about his pain? What if you have an antinatalist who says, you know what, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't want to be dealing with this. I don't want to play some mental video game in my mind to figure out how to accept all of this horror. I don't accept having been brought here because you had a notion in your head about how wonderful and positive it is, and because you didn't want to pay attention to the risks that you were playing with. What are you going to say to that kid?
Well, it's just another what if. You could literally argument the opposite. What if my kid is going to be great? What if my kid is going to make the world a better place, and so on and so on? You can literally argue the opposite. And the fact that this kid is asking this question again, we're going back to this idea of acceptance. Yes, the parents have their responsibilities, and that's their part of their responsibility to make sure that, yes, to do their best to make sure the kid will be equipped to deal with it. Yes, there's no guarantee. Of course, like you're saying, it's a risk. I agree with you. Life is a risk by its very definition.
Two things, and then I'll let Lay talk. One, gives you the right? One gives you the right to take that risk, especially two, in a world without the right to die. Okay, if somebody is in a horrific state, wants out, they can't do that. They can't do that in some sort of ethical, medically assisted, in most parts of the world, way. They have to just suffer through it because you said that it's good. Laith, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. As you said, there's no graceful exit. Unfortunately, it's not legalized, and that's why we see a lot of people committing suicide or attempting suicide. Uh, I have heard that the statistics say that every 40 seconds in the world there's a person who attempts suicide. So this tells how crazy is this world. I'm gonna
But
move. Yeah, Arthur, go ahead.
then you have the answer. You know the problem. Solve the problem. The problem is not stopping life. The problem is then authorizing euthanasia, for instance, which I'm in favor of actually.
But why
And,
take the risk in
yeah.
the first place?
But then the exact same. Why not? Why not take the risk? There is as much chance that your kid is gonna be miserable that is gonna be happy. There's no. I don't. Is there, I don't know. Is there statistics on that? I don't know. It's a really
No,
question, but I don't think.
since there's the possibility for him not to be happy, then there's a risk.
Why not adopt? Why not put your desire to take care of something or to see something grow or see something happy where there's already a need? Why create more need?
Well, I mean,
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
feel free to answer.
Okay. I mean, there's a few answers when I don't say anything and I just let you go, but there's always something to say. So yeah, I'm all in favor of adoption, but I don't think it's the same thing to create something like a kid, a new life, especially if there is some romantic aspect of it with the person you love and creating a family with your own DNA. And I don't think it's exactly the same thing. But yes, I mean, maybe for some people it's a good enough substitute. I think all people that are adopted in their life are very happy with it. I don't think it makes a lot of difference for them when it comes to the love that they give, whether it's actually their biological kid or not. But maybe that's how some people see it, which I could understand that you might not see the same thing between giving your love to an orphan and giving your love to your, like, literally your own biological kid.
Yeah. So the second question for Arthur now. Since you have, I know that you do not encourage having kids, and at the same time you're not an antinatalist. So
yeah, I'm not fixed on the question. Yeah.
You did not take any side on this, like you're neutral about it, as far as I know. So the question is, where do you think we should draw the line about the number of births for a specific family, for example? Like, when do you say that they should stop having kids now? After how many? After how many kids? And why? If you could explain why.
I don't think we should do it. I mean, I think this is not something you can force on people. I mean, this idea of forcing, this is what authoritarian regimes do, and you cannot force this kind of stuff on people. At best, if you want to pursue, if you want to move forward toward a specific philosophy of life.
Yeah, but let me interrupt you here. So
okay.
you say that we cannot force this on people.
I mean, you can, but it's not gonna work. I think
yeah,
it's
so you have no problem. Yeah, so you have no problem if there's like a certain family that has 15 kids. You're okay with it?
I mean, this might create other problem, but this leads to the problem to the responsibility of the parents. I agree with the fact that before having a kid, you should definitely think about it. I think for me, again, here another issue is that people make kids because that's what they're expected to do, because, oh, you get married and then you make kids, because you don't think about it. This I definitely agree with, and making 50 kids, I mean, it's a big example. And yes, maybe the parents should have thought a bit more, because I'm not sure that 2 parents can handle 50 kids. But again, you're pushing it a little bit far. I'm just saying that drawing a line is not a solution. You're going to create more problem, and you're saying that you don't want people suffering, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to just create more problem and more suffering. I don't think there's ever in history when politics put this kind of, I mean, the first example that comes to mind is China, when they had they had this sort of policy a few decades ago, and it was horrible. Like the way they dealt with children, it was absolutely horrible. There's so many horror stories on what happened to.
Why do you think it was horrible in China for the one-child policy? Why do you think it was horrible?
Well, it was, to be fair.
Yeah, it was. It
Yeah,
was,
yeah, but I
again,
just want to
because
know his opinion. Sorry.
I mean, I would guess that the first issue was maybe that they didn't have the structure to deal with it. I'm thinking about birth control, abortion, and these kind of things, which led to a lot of born children that were just literally abandoned, thrown away like trash, and so on. Like, I mean, I read about it a while ago, but basically, yes, a lot of stories like that. So I don't think that enforcing it like this, especially if you don't have the proper infrastructure, is gonna work. But I don't think it's something you can enforce on people anyway. Like trying to force people is usually not a good thing. Again, the best way to evolve towards something is education. And it takes time and it's frustrating because it's difficult, but it's the only way forward. If you force things on people, you're gonna meet resistance. And you're just gonna create more problem, I think.
So, Amanda, as you heard Arthur, he was saying that we have no right to force this on anyone not to have kids. So they have the right to have as much as they want kids, and it's their responsibility. And how do you respond to that?
Well, first off, nobody brought up forcing anything on anybody. I don't think it can start there. Certainly, you can't just go, "Hey, no more kids. Turn the tap off. No more." You can't do that. That won't work. China did it very badly. There's no question about that. And has anybody done it well yet? No. So that critique is definitely salient. I get that completely. And how you do it effectively, how you effectively limit birth, I think that's a human project that does have it has not had a good trial run yet, and it's a huge project that I think the human race desperately needs. I mean, if human beings that don't want to go extinct want to remain here, then population is going to have to become a much more important issue, and limiting birth is going to have to become something that we figure out how to do effectively, or else there's just no hope of survival. Now, Laith and I are kind of happy about that, but we don't want it to happen in that kind of way. We would like human beings to be able to take some kind of responsibility. All of human behavior, for the most part, is controlled by laws and regulations, so as to limit harm. So the fact that there is no more aggressive thing you can do to a human being than either kill it or give birth to it. Those are the two most aggressive acts, and that you can possibly inflict. There's lots of other really aggressive acts, don't get me wrong, but life and death are the two biggest things. So the fact that we create all kinds of regulations around all other types of behavior, and somehow procreation is the one thing that is so sacrosanct that we can't, we can't even touch that one, doesn't make any sense, especially in a world that is dying because there are so many of us, because we are raping this world so significantly. So again, I don't think you can, I'm not, what I propose is that the memes in society need to change. And I'm talking about the global society. And that's one of the reasons why antinatalism is so important, because it's a meme, it's an idea. It's this idea of we don't really have the right to impose. We don't have the right to inflict this over and over and over again. And the other part of it is we don't have the right to throw each other away. There's a lot of need. There's a lot of life already here, and we don't give a shit about it. And that's awful. So I think what the memes in society need to change. Then you can go further than that. You can incentivize not having kids. You can cut the incentives for having children that a lot of governments have. There's all kinds of ways in which we can make procreation a lot less appetizing and meaningful. And in some ways, it's starting to happen naturally, even without antinatalism. World population is, people are not wanting to have kids because women are more educated, women have more access to contraception, all of these things. All people have slowly more access to these things. So it is becoming a less favored practice amongst the human race anyway, I do believe. And I think antinatalism is going to be that straw that breaks that camel's back, essentially. And I lost my train of thought, but yes, I disagree.
Amanda, you just said something that I was actually planning to ask Arthur about, and you just mentioned some of the answer, maybe.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm gonna go back to you, Amanda. Uh, how do you respond to people who say that you have these views because you're depressed or you faced some problems in your life on a personal level? Uh, you had some problems when you were young, circumstances. How do you respond to these people who say that?
Well, as far as my own individual lived experience, sure. I've never made any secret of that. You can watch my YouTube channel for days. I got lots of problems. I do have bipolar disorder. I do have obsessive compulsive disorder. I've have it's a life. It's positive and negatives. All life has those things. But antinatalism is not. I'm not when I'm speaking as an antinatalist. I am not speaking from my own personal life experience. I am trying to make a sum build a sum opinion based on everything that I see in the world from history, from a knowledge of what the DNA molecule is and how it's just this thing that produces beings in a gladiator war in a competition with each other, and how there's absolutely no good reason for that to keep going. There's just not a whole lot. I mean, if you just look at the way that human life is, and this whole experience last few months has really highlighted it, especially. But if you just look at what human life is doing, it's just, for me anyway, it's just very easy to draw those conclusions that it's not leading to something that justifies the perpetuation of more of it.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I'm gonna go back to Arthur for his last question. How do you explain when there are third world countries that have the birth rates is very high, and other countries, developed countries in Europe, for example, like Norway, Sweden, Japan, are declining?
Honestly, I don't. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any specific answer. What I would advance is, yes, exactly some of the points that Amanda made before. I think there are infrastructure. I mean, first of all, there is a certain cultural acceptance with like abortion, for instance, and you have the infrastructure to have abortion. Again, to with childbirth control as well. So, which again, from my knowledge, is maybe not as accessible in less developed countries. But again, I don't want to be definite on that. I don't have enough knowledge, but that's what I would say. And I don't know. Yes, I think all the studies on that show that when women reach a certain level of education, they tend to have less children overall. So, and this is, I would say, it's connected as well, because yes, education in Europe is usually more accessible to a wider range of population and to women as well. So that's what I would say. Yes, exactly. And I mean, I think it's, Amanda was talking about overpopulation. Everything that I've read on the subject, we're not there yet. Like the worst estimation are like maybe 9 billion people. I think the most positive one were like 14 millions, which seems a lot. But in any case, we're not there yet. But what a lot of people are arguing is that we're with this idea of slowing or even decreasing demographic rates, and the idea that the less developed country will catch up. The idea is that we should reach some sort of what we call the replacement rate, and not, instead of having a growing population, just having a stabilized population. And then the problem which is left is actually not the resource of Earth, but how we share them. Because the idea is that Earth has enough resources for us to live with that stabilized population, and that the problem then at that point is not the number of people on Earth, but how we share these resources, which is another problem in that case. But I think what I'm hoping for is that, yeah, we would go in that direction, finding a way to stabilize the level of population, which is what some people are saying at the current rate of things. We're not going to keep going up again. Yeah. I think it's, yeah, people are getting more conscious of it. Even if they're not necessarily anti-natalist, people are aware of the impact of having a children. So that's one of the things, for instance, I was talking about, when people should ask themselves a question before they have kids. You don't just pop a kid like that. Of course, you should think about it. Maybe that's also one of the reasons why the demographic rates are lower in Europe and so on, because if you look at the press, you hear about these topics quite regularly, whether it's through anti-natalist channels or not. You see it in the press, you see it on internet, a lot of articles about it. Why should I have a children? Which I think maybe 50 years ago, you would not have that.
So, Arthur, have you heard of the 5 mass extinctions that happened before in the history of planet Earth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember them, but yeah, I've heard of them before.
And I'm guessing that the 5th one was when the dinosaurs went extinct, maybe millions of years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think that if we keep going this way, are we gonna reach the 6th mass extinction? And if you think that we might reach it, is it still worth it to have kids and that you have no problem?
I think we don't know. I mean, it's hard to bet on the future because there's nothing to build on it. It's from there. It's just a belief. I believe that, but there's nothing strong to really build on it. And we actually, there's no answer to that. We don't know. We just don't know. Just like when you give birth to a kid, you don't know. So for me, it's actually the same answer. I really don't have a reply to that. I think humanity is. I mean, it's what being a human again. Just like life is bad and wrong, human are just able as doing bad and as doing good. So I think humanity has the mean to save itself, or also has the mean to kill itself. I think both options are completely possible. And based on that, I still don't see any problem on bringing a kid, because then you can very much argue that yes, my kid is gonna make things worse, but you can also argue that yes, my kid is gonna make things better.
Yeah,
But
thank you,
I don't
Arthur.
think we know where it's going. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So before we end this episode, Amanda, if you have one more question to ask to Arthur, what would you ask him?
If I have a question to ask Arthur?
Yeah, yes, if you want to ask him a question.
Oh, let me think on that for a second here. I'm not prepared.
Take your time.
I don't know. I mean, I sort of asked the question that I most wanted to ask. I mean, if you have the opinion that, hey, it's worth taking all of it's worth throwing the dice with somebody else's welfare. It's worth taking this chance, with a new being, that might not thank you for taking that chance. That was really the biggest question I have based on what you were saying.
I mean, if I can give you a more definite answer to that, for me, it's really up to you. It's like religion, if you want. It's something that it's between you and God. You said, and this is between you and yourself. And you ask yourself that question. And that's personally, that's all I would ask of people, that they think about it, and then that they make an educated decision. And from there, I can understand both point of view, and I respect both point of view.
Okay, but here's my question then: why is it between you and God and not you and the child you're producing? There's a real lack amongst procreators that, like, it's always about this, what you're gaining or not gaining from the experience of having a child, what you're realizing or developing in yourself. But the product review that the child gives your decision, you basically are buying. Yeah, it's like, it is like a product review. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, and so what if the fact that there's this possibility that something as meaningful as that person's life, will be deemed a bad product, all because you wanted to take this chance. If I'm just saying, if you're dealing with a chance that substantial, that meaningful, with that much suffering and death attached to it, like literally having a child that wants to kill themselves, why would you take that chance? What could possibly be worth it? I mean, isn't it possible to derive your meaning and positivity from life doing some other kind of experiment? Like, what gives you the right to be Dr. Frankenstein and do a biological experiment? You're essentially saying that you have the right to do biological experiments with the life of a child that may grow up to hate you for having done so. So what gives you that right? Just because that is the way life is set up?
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, to the first answer, I mean, because I mean, just like people can talk with God, sort of, even if they can't, the reason is you're not going to involve a child because the child is not there. So I mean, I think you already have the answer. As for the again, the other question, I mean, for me, it's you will never have the answer from the kids, and you can never know if that kid will be happy or not. You can, again, and you're giving this example that maybe my kid will kill himself. I mean, if you look at the percentage of the population that kills himself, there's actually a much more higher chance that he's not going to kill himself. So on a purely statistical level and rational level,
Let's stay away from statistics for a minute. What makes one life work? What one example, one child, one life? What that's gonna die by suicide or be miserably unhappy? What gives you the right to take that one chance to produce that one being? Not what the statistics will be, but just that one individual.
I don't know. But like we said,
That's okay. Fair enough.
Arthur was saying that there's like people who commit suicide are not so much in this world, and that it's a very low possibility. But that person who reaches this stage of thinking of committing suicide that means that he reached a point where he cannot take it anymore, and it's the hardest decision to take, maybe.
And what about it? I mean, yes, I agree. It's hard. I'm trying to understand your point. Like I said, it's horrible. But again, if you just make a long list of all the horrible things in the world, it's easy to say that the world is horrible. But again, that's not an argument, because you can then make a long list of all the beautiful things and say, hey, look, the world is beautiful. It's just showing up at horrible thing and saying, oh, they're a horrible thing, I'm not gonna make a kid. I don't really see it as an argument, because it's so easy to say the opposite. And again, you don't know. At the end of the day, you have no idea. So that's why I'm talking about statistics, for instance, because the truth is that you don't know. You cannot guarantee that child happiness. You cannot. So for me, that's where it all stems from, and the fact that that's how life is. That's how.
But
life,
don't you? Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Forgive me.
No. But I was done.
No, but don't you think that that's being a little glib to somebody else's pain? That I can't know. There's a 1 in 2 possibility they're going to be happy. I mean, You're kind of saying that you really just don't care. That if it ends up being great, hey, I won. If it's not, that's a broken person. Why couldn't they fix themselves? They failed.
No. Sometimes maybe they can't. And that's horrible, but that's how life is.
But isn't that on you? Isn't that on you as the parent? You're the one who said, yes, that is a decision worth taking. I had conversations with antinatalists who said this to me before I made the decision. I had all the information.
Yes. Of course, I think, I'm not a parent, so I wouldn't know, but do parents who've had kids who went through horrible suffering ask themselves the question? Yes, I guess they do. And maybe you should, it's a touchy subject. Maybe you should invite one if you get the chance, or if they're willing to talk about it. This could be very interesting. But of course, it's not all on the parents. I mean, especially as you grow up, and very quickly, most of your life, you're responsible of yourself. After legally 18 years, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, it depends. But so of course the parents have their responsibilities on it, but I don't agree with this idea of putting everything on them either.
Let's just put it this way. Parents they want to have sex. Okay, this starts from sex, which is great. But like the idea that we're going to have sex, we're going to produce a new human being. We're going to put all of this risk on gaining our pleasure. And a new human being has to be born out of this momentary pleasure that we have. And you
can have sex without giving kids. Again, I mean, we're getting to the point. Okay,
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. Yes, you can wear a condom. I'm just saying the idea that you have all this intentionality behind but the intentionality of producing a new human being who's going to have all of this weight on them, just because you need to derive your pleasure out of this momentary act and these and to give birth to a new narrative of all this success and happiness of the possibilities or in the world is just a little bit no, it's incredibly selfish. It just is. I mean, you can't there's go ahead.
So I don't understand the relationship with the momentary pleasure. I mean, when people do kids, it's not just for sex. I mean, I think the pleasure that people foresee when they want to have a kid is a lifelong pleasure. I mean, this idea of creating a family, maybe having grandkids, it's not just.
I'm just saying
pleasure.
That
I think
people are trading their momentary pleasure in an instance of procreation for a possible lifetime of misery, and that is not a reasonable give and take.
But human is not reasonable. You cannot expect full rationality from human being. But again, you choose to see it as a potential lifelong risk. I think when people have children, they see it as a potential lifelong source of happiness. That's why human population has been growing so much overall. I think if it was so horrible to have a kid, I don't know, mankind would have died sooner, I guess. I'm not sure.
Well, don't you think it might be because people don't want to face those realities? We're so addicted to the positive narratives in our culture and all of these ideas. It's no matter what it turns out being, whether the kid is happy or not, it doesn't matter because we're getting to fulfill our sense of hope and our narrative of and our it's my right to take these risks. I was born with this equipment and I have the right to take risks with your welfare. Isn't it just a willful act of ignoring reality and not valuing the suffering and pain of others? I mean, isn't that the real mental illness of mankind, that we don't seem to place any real value on the consequences of deriving our satisfactions?
What you call a risk, some people will call it a chance, an opportunity.
Yeah, but see, that's
it's on some risk, but that's what life is. The risks are there anyway. From just because someone thinks there's for them, they see it as an opportunity.
Yeah, but you have more power than that as a human being. You have responsibility. And if you know that something can end up existing for absolutely no good reason, and it can be this extreme negative and not a positive, that there's all this possibility of it going so badly, then what gives you that right? What gives you that right to play with another person's welfare?
What is it that you call no good reason? Again, like the potential of having a fulfilled, enjoyed life. It's a good reason enough.
But why can't you have that fulfillment without imposing it on somebody else? There's no reason for that new being to exist in the first place.
I think you can. I think it's very possible. And I think overall, if people who have children and people who don't have children, I think I've read a couple of our studies that I've read on the subject, the percentage are actually very similar. Like both the percentage of the parents and non-parents which are satisfied with their life were actually quite similar overall. I think it's very. I'm not even sure that I want kids in my life, and I believe it's very possible to have a fulfilled life without kids, for sure, definitely. It's very possible, and I agree with you also that there is some sort of selfishness in it. But then what I disagree with is this idea that selfishness is so bad. I mean, this is a sort of this association that we make. Oh my God, you're selfish. We're selfish by default. We're all selfish. Again, this is also part of life.
Right.
There's always
the living are selfish. The unborn don't need it. So why create more selfishness? I'm just saying all of these things, yes, they're part of life. They're part of life. They're part of life. But you don't need to create. You don't need to perpetuate it. Well,
but why
because
is so bad? Again,
selfishness creates suffering.
Not necessarily. That's not true. That's again, there is this association that being selfish
I'm
is
just
bad
saying,
because you only think.
You seem to think that just because there's a possibility that a selfish act may lead to something good, you have all of this right to take that chance, when it just as easily and probably more likely can cause something negative. So why not proceed with caution I mean, that's really what the antinatalist is saying. Why aren't we proceeding with all of this due caution? Life is a Shakespeare play that keeps playing out over and over and over again. We know the way it goes, and very rarely does the product review end up in some sort of positive thing. You know, we
I
can talk
disagree
to
with
people.
that.
Well,
It's
I
not a
mean,
Shakespeare. I thought life is not a Shakespearean play. I think this is looking at life in a very grim way. This is focusing on, like, it's a choice to focus on the war and all the horrible thing. And I'm not saying you should ignore them. I'm not saying you should not care. I think it's actually a great way to dedicating your life to improving things. It makes complete sense. And that I'm not saying you shouldn't care. It's, for me, it's again, it's the idea of acceptance, accepting that life is like this, and don't let it eat you from the inside. Just
right.
peace is accepting is peace.
Accept things, try to be as happy as you can in your life, but to impose that onto a next generation, a new being that does not need to be playing these games in the first place, does not need to be deriving pleasure, does not need to have a happy day or see the sunshine or any of these things, is the not just the most selfish act, it is the most aggressive act that you can do to somebody else aside from killing them. You will be happy. You will be a boy. You will be a girl. You will be this religion. You will be positive. You will dress like, all of these things have absolutely no need to be imposed on something new. You know, those that are alive, yeah, we have to deal with these things, but there's no reason to open the door and let somebody else in. There just isn't.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe you don't have this need. Apparently, a lot of people do have this need, and they feel that they can do it. I'm sure most parents try their best, and maybe it's not enough. I'm sure in many cases it is not enough. But I think you're talking about this need, and I think
well, let's put it this way. People have a need to rape children. There are people with that need. There are people that have a need to kill. And should we allow those needs, or should we critique those needs and put barriers in place of those needs, because we know that those needs are not positive things to fulfill and are not substantive? Just because something has a need doesn't mean that it's a need that has the right to be fulfilled.
Well, I think you're comparing two things that are different, because having an adult assaulting a kid will pretty much guarantee a bad outcome. Having a baby, again, you're setting it as something.
Having a child ensures
No, it does not. That's the thing. You sell it as this, like, something horrible will have to happen to this kid, and his life will be ruined forever. You have no guarantee of that.
Right, because I don't have a guarantee. It's a possibility. It's a chance. It's the dice that you are taking, the possibility you are rolling.
Yes.
You are producing the children that the pedophile will rape. You are producing the woman that the rapist will rape. You are producing the victims.
But this is victim shaming. You're basically saying it's the victim's fault. This is
I'm saying it's I'm saying it's those that create victims that are at fault.
No, the problem.
And when you become a parent, you lose part of your victimhood.
The pedophile is the problem, not making it.
Absolutely. That is it's not an either or. Yes, the person perpetuating the crime is at fault, but the fact that we keep on feeding those victims, we keep on feeding those aggressors with new victim is the root of the problem. It's how you go all the way down and see, yeah, if we turn off the tap, all this shit stops too.
Yes, it's I see that solution, but it's a solution, like, as you put it, it's not a solution to a problem. You put it as a solution to all problem. It's a bit extreme. Why not deal with the problem themselves? Why go and turn on the plug when you can just swipe the? This is an analogy. I'm going with the analogy of the plug. If you can kill the virus with your antivirus, why do you need to destroy the computer? If you get the idea of the analogy, you are talking about the plugs. Why do you need to unplug and kill the whole system if you can target the virus and get rid of it? Why do that? Why not address the problem? Why run away from life?
Well, I don't think we're showing much evidence of being able to solve something like pedophilia and rape. We're not taking these problems really as seriously as we should, if that is our intention. So maybe if our failures in actually curing some of these comparatively smaller problems aren't adding up, I mean, how many years have human beings been on this planet, and we're, just starting to let gay people get married? Civil rights is taking a hell of a long time to, actually formulate into reality. We're not doing very well solving these more comparatively simple problems. So maybe the idea of how do you turn it all off is starting to become a lot more important, because the sum total of our failures is starting to look really, really big. I mean, the fact that we can come on the internet and talk about all these solutions, and there's all this energy, and we're all, people that want to make change and fix things, and none of it, so little of it ever actually happens. That creates the need to get to the root of the problem. And how do you stop the biggest problem? Because all of these smaller ones are not getting fixed, and it's a never ending ocean of suffering that keeps getting produced by our failures to fix even the smallest problems in this world.
I think humankind has done a great progress. We went from, am I gonna have food tonight in the cave? Am I gonna die of cold because I don't have fire in the cave? To should that person with a different sex, or should that person with a different skin color have the same right as me? Is a huge progress. I don't agree with this idea of progress, because humankind as a whole has incredibly evolved from the age. I don't know, like if you go back millions of years ago, where we would die, I don't know, 30 years old, 25 years old, to today's, overall humankind is progressing. But yes, it's life. It's a hard way. It's not like a straight lines up. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up again, it goes down. It's a very difficult road. But as a whole, humanity is progressing. And I mean, we probably never are gonna have the guarantee that we will never have any pedophile anymore. We'll never have any rape anymore. I don't think it's a possibility to guarantee it. But it's a direction. It gives meaning to your life. It's a way to follow. It's a way to go.
Well, I think, Laith, I'm not sure where you want to go from here, but I will just say that the ultimate civil right is antinatalism and ephilism. The right to not be imposed upon, the right to not have the dice rolled for you and all of these things decided for you just because somebody needed to have a pleasure, somebody had a notion in their mind, somebody had a narrative that they were addicted to. That is the ultimate and final civil right on this planet, is to not be imposed upon.
Yeah, so thanks to both of you. I didn't interfere for the last 20 minutes. I gave you the space to to have a heat discussion.
But I think it was well. We did not. We listened to it. We listened to each other. It was a good discussion. Exactly. There was not like too much interruption. I think it went well.
Yeah, I do apologize if I interrupted a few times.
No. Same here. I think it went very well. I was happy to have this discussion.
I am too. Thank you, Arthur.
Since I gave Amanda the chance to ask you one more question, which was the final question, now I'll give you the chance, Arthur, to ask Amanda. She was surprised.
I'm good. I think we've had a nice discussion, and I think my question would fall somewhere in that discussion. I think it's okay.
All right. So thank you again for accepting to be with me in this episode. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was a good discussion, and thank you guys for watching. See you next Saturday for the third episode of The Opposite Thought.